When the last stone of a temple was destroyed, and the light of the ancient world began to dim, a child was born in the southern region of Mesopotamia. Nearly 250 years had passed since the great Tower of Babylon collapsed. During this time, humanity not only lost their shared language but also began communicating in cold, emotionless words, words spoken without moving lips, leaving hearts distant from each other. A significant event transformed their culture, leading them to forsake the God who made them in His image and instead place their trust in gods of their own making. Wooden and stone idols shaped like humans became objects of worship. These idols had ears but could not hear, mouths but could not speak. People wandered, searching for enlightenment in lifeless objects and seeking messages from the dead. Worshipping self-made gods was easier because if you created the gods, you controlled what was right and wrong, didn't you? Across the earth, scattered groups began to define their own versions of truth and the path to life. But about 140 miles southwest of Babylon, in a quiet and unremarkable land, a man named Terah witnessed the birth of his first son. That son was Abram, a name that means exalted father. By the end of our story, however, not only Abram's name but everything about him will change forever. Before starting this incredible tale of Abraham's journey through fear, trials, and unwavering faith, please give this video a like if it has been helpful to you. Remember, YouTube's algorithms favor videos with more likes, so your support can help this video reach more people. Sending you lots of love. Many years after Abram was born, and as the story of Abram's call began, his father, Terah, made a courageous choice to leave Ur of the Chaldeans and head for Canaan. However, the journey stopped when his family settled in Haran. There, Abram received a divine call to fulfill a purpose that went beyond his father's vision. God spoke to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. Through you, all peoples on earth will be blessed." To modern readers, this may seem perplexing, but ancient Jewish writers and audiences understood Abram and his family to be idol worshippers. However, Abram's story marks the lifting of Cain's curse and the beginning of a narrative centered on God's mercy, a mercy that offered redemption to humanity instead of judgment. Through this mercy, God demonstrated His power by guiding Abram and his descendants through trials. God presented Abram with a pivotal decision: to honor Him, the one who had revealed Himself, or to continue placing his trust in the promises of the gods he once followed. Abram stood at a significant crossroads, choosing between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, between obedience to God and his own desires. Abram chose to obey God. At 75 years old, he left Haran with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all their possessions, and their household. They journeyed to Canaan. Upon arriving, Abram passed through the land to Shechem near the oak of Moreh, where the Lord appeared to him, saying, "To your offspring I will give this land." In response, Abram built an altar to honor the Lord. From Shechem he traveled east of Bethel, pitched his tent with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east, built another altar, and called on the name of the Lord. Abram journeyed onward toward the Negev. However, the journey turned out to be more challenging than expected. A severe famine struck the promised land, leaving him grappling with doubt and fear. Could he truly leave behind everything he knew to follow a God he did not fully understand? In his uncertainty, Abram chose to lead his people away from Canaan to Egypt, hoping to find temporary refuge. Yet it was there that his faith would face its greatest trials. As Abram and Sarai arrived in Egypt, Abram said to her, "I know you are a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but let you live. So please say that you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake and my life spared." This request, born of fear, revealed Abram's wavering trust in God, who had guided him thus far. When Pharaoh saw Sarai's beauty, he took her into his palace, believing Abram to be her brother. Pharaoh rewarded Abram generously with wealth and status, but God intervened to end this wrongdoing. He brought severe plagues upon Pharaoh and his household. When Pharaoh discovered the truth about Sarai, he was struck with fear of God's power and returned her to Abram. He commanded them to leave Egypt, allowing them to take their riches with them. The newfound wealth, however, brought fresh challenges for Abram's family. Their possessions grew so abundant that the land could no longer sustain them both. Abram and Lot eventually decided to part ways. Lot settled in the fertile plains near Zoar, which included the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, while Abram pitched his tents in Hebron by the oaks of Mamre. Peace, however, was short-lived, as human greed and corruption took root. Conflict arose as war broke out among the kings in the region. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, led an alliance with 3 other kings, Amraphel of Shinar, Arioch of Elasar, and Tidal of Goyim, to conquer the region. 5 local kings, including Bera of Sodom and Birsha of Gomorrah, united against them in the valley of Siddim. Despite their efforts, the local kings were defeated, and Kedorlaomer's forces looted the cities, capturing Lot in the process. Upon hearing that Lot had been taken captive, Abram mobilized 318 trained men from his household and pursued the enemy to Damascus, where he defeated them. He rescued Lot, reclaimed all his possessions, and returned home, earning the admiration of local leaders. In the valley of Shaveh, Abram met 2 kings. Melchizedek, the king of Salem and a priest of the Most High God, blessed Abram with bread and wine. In gratitude, Abram gave him 1/10 of his wealth, recognizing him as a symbol of righteousness and peace. Meanwhile, King Bera of Sodom, representing wickedness, offered Abram all the spoils in return for gratitude. Abram, however, refused, declaring that he would only accept blessings from the Most High God. Abram's actions demonstrated not only his faith, but also his belief that Melchizedek's God was the true creator and the ultimate source of his strength. When Abram met the kings in the valley of Shaveh, the light of his faith in God began to illuminate his life, inspiring many nations. Shortly afterward, God appeared to Abram, promising him a child despite his advanced age. God declared that Abram's descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky, and that the land of Canaan would belong to them forever. Abram believed in God, trusting him as the creator and provider of all he had. Although he had stumbled in his faith before, this belief was counted as righteousness, solidifying his relationship with God. However, God revealed more to Abram. In a deep sleep, Abram experienced a vision of darkness and heard a prophecy. His descendants would live as strangers in a foreign land, enslaved for 400 years, before God would bring judgment on the nation that oppressed them. As time went by, Abram and Sarai still had no children, even though they were nearly 100 years old. How could their descendants be as numerous as the stars? How could God's promise be fulfilled? In her impatience, Sarai came up with a plan. She decided that her servant Hagar would have a child in her place. Abram agreed, and Hagar gave birth to a son named Ishmael. Not long after, God appeared to Abram and said, "I am the Almighty God. Walk before me faithfully and be without blame. I will establish a covenant between me and you and multiply your descendants greatly. In God's presence, Abram's name was changed to Abraham, which means father of many nations, symbolizing an everlasting bond between God and Abraham. This renaming served as a reminder of God's promise and his complete control over Abraham's life and destiny. To reinforce the covenant, God gave Abraham a sign: circumcision. This act represented the cleansing of sin and the inclusion into God's faithful family. Although Abraham's descendants might stray from the covenant, God's promise would remain unbroken, ensuring that a great king would come from his lineage. Sarai was also renamed Sarah, meaning princess. This change, marked by the addition of the letter H, strengthened her connection with the Creator. From Sarah would come children who would rule the earth under God's guidance. Through the couple, God's light began to shine brighter, fulfilling his grand promise that all he had spoken would come to pass. A year later, God appeared to Abraham and Sarah near the oak of Mamre. Despite being 99 years old and beyond the age of bearing children, Abraham was told by God that they would have a child within a year. Meanwhile, God stood under the oak tree, gazing toward the valley where the sinful cities of Sodom and Gomorrah awaited his judgment. These cities were home to Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his family. Closely connected to God's care, Abraham was about to face a major test. From the early promises in the story, it was known that one day someone would crush the serpent's head and reign in righteousness. To test Abraham's faith, God revealed his plan to destroy the two cities that had completely abandoned all notions of justice and morality. Abraham boldly interceded with God, pleading not once but 8 times. He asked if the cities would be spared if righteous people were found, beginning with 50 and reducing the number to 10. God agreed that if 10 righteous people were found, he would withhold judgment. 2 angels were sent to Sodom to investigate. When they arrived at the city square, Lot saw them and, recognizing their importance, urged them not to spend the night in the square because of the city's wickedness. Reluctantly, the angels went to Lot's home, but soon an angry mob surrounded the house, demanding Lot hand over the visitors for immoral purposes. As the mob prepared to break in, the angels acted, striking the crowd with blindness. They instructed Lot and his family to leave the city immediately and warned them not to look back under any circumstances. As Lot and his family fled, fire and brimstone rained down from heaven, obliterating Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction resembled creation, unraveling into chaos. During the escape, Lot's wife disobeyed the warning and looked back, turning into a pillar of salt as a consequence of her disobedience. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't solely an act of divine judgment, but also a striking reminder of God's justice and righteousness triumphing over wickedness. The ruins left behind stand as a lasting lesson for humanity about the consequences of abandoning God's moral standards. When Abraham witnessed the obliteration of Sodom and Gomorrah, he understood that there weren't even 10 righteous individuals within those cities. Saddened but unwavering in his faith, he moved his family to the Negev, starting anew with a renewed commitment to God and his blessings. This relocation brought them back to the Promised Land, where their journey first began. Soon after, an unexpected series of events unfolded. King Abimelech, who ruled over their new settlement, became infatuated with Sarah's beauty and sought to take her as his wife. However, that very night, God appeared to him in a dream, warning him that he had committed a grave error by taking a married woman. Alarmed, Abimelech pleaded with God for forgiveness, explaining that he had acted innocently, unaware of Sarah's marital status. God revealed Sarah's identity, causing the king to tremble in fear upon realizing that Abraham was a prophet under divine protection. To avoid divine punishment, Abimelech quickly restored Sarah to Abraham and offered them a significant amount of wealth. With deep respect for God, Abimelech announced that Abraham and his family could live in peace on his land. This incident emphasized God's power in shielding his chosen ones and his mercy, even when Abraham and Sarah confronted challenges of their own making. God kept his word to Sarah, allowing her to conceive and give birth to Isaac, symbolizing the seed of the woman. However, joy turned to tension when Sarah requested that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Though hesitant, Abraham provided them with provisions for their journey into the desert. In the wilderness, God appeared to Hagar and Ishmael, promising that Ishmael would father a great nation, becoming the ancestor of 12 Arab princes. Around this time, King Abimelech sought another meeting with Abraham at Sarah. Worried about Abraham's growing influence, Abimelech proposed a treaty to prevent disputes and maintain peace for future generations. Abraham agreed, and to commemorate the pact, he planted a tamarisk tree and worshipped God as the eternal creator. Following these events, Abraham faced the ultimate test of his faith. God called him Abraham. He answered, "Here I am." God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt sacrifice on a mountain that I will show you." The next morning, Abraham prepared the supplies, split the wood, and set out with Isaac and 2 servants for the mountain. After 3 days, Abraham saw the place from a distance and said to the servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while the boy and I go over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you." Abraham placed the wood for the offering on Isaac's shoulders and continued the journey. The mountain would later be called Golgotha in Aramaic, meaning the place of the skull. This site would become a symbol of faith and God's divine character. Abraham had once negotiated to save Lot's life, reflecting his profound sense of justice. But this time, he remained silent. He made no appeals for Isaac. Perhaps he understood that his life and all he had was given by God, the one true deity he trusted completely. On this path, Abraham's silence wasn't a sign of surrender, but a testament to his unwavering faith. He believed that the same God who had given him Isaac held the ultimate authority and could also redeem him. Could God's mercy ever fail? Would the one who called Abraham righteous turn away from him in his darkest hour? As Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac, the question loomed, could God's mercy and promises to those who trust him ever falter? In a moment of immense tension, Isaac, bound on the altar, lay still before his father. Abraham's hand, trembling but steady, gripped a sharp knife, ready to do the unthinkable. Sacrifice the son he loved most at God's command. Each movement testified to his faith and reminded him of the severity of the trial he faced. This wasn't merely an act of obedience, it was the ultimate test of God's nature. Was he truly the God who keeps his promises? Was he as righteous and merciful as Abraham believed? As the knife was raised, that moment encapsulated all of Abraham's life. Every trial, promise, failure, and act of faith, built step by step. This story transcends Abraham. It raises a universal question for humanity. Will God's mercy ever abandon those he has called righteous? "Here I am," Abraham answered when God called out. And God said, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him, for now I know that you fear God, placing me above all other gods." In amazement and relief, Abraham looked up to see a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. He quickly took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of Isaac. Abraham named the place, "The Lord will provide," Jehovah Jireh, and it has since been said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." At that moment, Abraham realized that God not only holds power over life and death, but can also restore what was lost. His faith in God's sovereignty was affirmed by his willingness to offer his only son, and through this act, God's unwavering loyalty to those who trust him was revealed. Abraham's entire life, his existence, his wealth, his promised son, and the faith he placed in God was a gift from the divine. Yet it was this ultimate test, marked by a substituted sacrifice, that showcased Abraham's unshakable dedication to God and confirmed God's unchanging faithfulness. Every action demonstrated that his mercy and provision are always for those who trust him. After God reaffirmed his covenant with Abraham, time passed, and Sarah, his devoted wife, passed away at 127 years old. Overcome with grief, Abraham arranged her burial and sought a fitting place for her to rest. He negotiated with Ephron, a local Hittite, to purchase the cave of Machpelah for her tomb. Although Ephron offered to give the cave for free, Abraham insisted on paying 400 silver shekels, ensuring clear ownership for himself and his descendants. As Abraham's life drew to a close, he married another wife, Keturah, and had many more children. Yet his heart remained devoted to the promise God had made through Isaac. At the age of 175, Abraham died. His two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, reconciled to bury their father together in the cave of Machpelah, next to Sarah. Though these stories may seem ancient, they carry profound themes of sacrifice and redemption, motifs woven throughout the Bible. From loss to family unity, from God's promises to his ultimate provision, Abraham's journey stands as a testament to faith and reveals God's mercy and love for all humanity. In the aftermath of Babel's fall and humanity's dispersion, people turned to worship man-made gods. These false gods demanded horrific acts, including child sacrifice. But make no mistake, the God in this story stands apart. He is nothing like the false gods of that era. Throughout this narrative, we see God's disdain for child sacrifice. He never intended for Abraham to harm Isaac, the son whom he cherished just as much as Abraham did. Isaac was not only a fulfillment of God's promise, but also a symbol of the future. A descendant of Isaac would one day crush the serpent's head. This story is more than an account of Abraham's faith. It affirms God as the author of life, not destruction. He does not require violent sacrifices, but calls for trust and obedience, while providing redemption at the perfect moment. In Isaac, we catch a glimpse of the one who would defeat the serpent. To overcome death, this Savior would have to pass through death itself and emerge victorious. For now, God says, a lamb will suffice. Yet we know that this is only temporary. God's love for Isaac reflects his plan for the future, a day when he would send his only son, who would face a choice between life and death. On that day, there would be no substitute. Only God himself would become the ultimate sacrifice, paving the way to eternal life. As we close the story of Abraham, the father of nations, a man of immense faith and obedience, let his journey remind us that God always fulfills his promises, even through great trials and sacrifices. If this story has inspired or encouraged you, share it with others so the light of faith can spread. Be sure to like, follow, and turn on notifications to hear more stories that will touch your heart and soul. Stay steadfast in your faith, and we'll meet again in the next journey. Let's walk together on the path of faith.